Protist structure and function. Protists move, sense the environment, digest food, and even reproduce, all within the confines of a single cell. Imagine what such cells would have to be like to succeed in a never ending struggle for life on Earth. Protists are winners in that struggle. How? How do protists move in the environment? Some protists move by changing their cell shape, and some move by means of specialized organelles. Other protists do not move actively but are carried by wind, water, and other organisms. Many unicellular protists move by changing their shape, a process that makes use of cytoplasmic projections known as pseudopods. The cytoplasm of an amoeba, for example, streams into the pseudopod and the rest of the cell follows. Streams into here, and the rest of the cell will follow. This type of locomotion is called amoeboid movement and is found in most protists. Amoeboid movement is powered by cytoskeleton protein called actin. Actin also plays a role in the muscle contractions of animals. Many protists move by means of cilia and flagella, structures supported by microtubules. Cilia are short and numerous, and they move somewhat like oars on a boat. Flagella are relatively long and usually number only one or two per cell. Some flagella spin like tiny propellers, but most produce a wave-like motion from the base to the tip. Cilia are like many oars on the side, and flagella are like an oar at the back, spinning or vibrating. Protists that move using cilia are known as ciliates, and those that move with flagella are known as flagellates. Some protists are non-motile. They depend on the air or water currents and other organisms to carry them around. These protists form reproductive cells called spores that can enter the cells of other organisms and live as parasites. Spore-forming protists include Plasmodium, which is carried by mosquitoes and causes malaria, and Cryptosporidium, which spreads through contaminated drinking water and causes severe intestinal disease. How do protists reproduce? Some protists reproduce asexually by mitosis. Others have a life cycle that combine asexual and sexual forms of reproduction. Amoebas and many other protists reproduce by mitosis. They duplicate their genetic material and then divide into two genetically identical cells. Mitosis enables protists to reproduce rapidly, especially under ideal conditions. But it produces cells that are genetically identical to the parent cell and thus limits the development of genetic diversity. Paramecia and most xylates reproduce asexually by mitotic cell division. However, under stress, paramecia can remake themselves through conjugation, a process in which two organisms exchange genetic information. After conjugating, the cells then reproduce by mitosis. Paramecium has two types of nuclei. Paramecium has two types of nuclei, a macronucleus and one or more smaller nuclei, micronuclei. The micronucleus holds a reserve copy of every gene in the cell. The macronucleus has multiple copies of the genes the cell uses in its day-to-day activities. The macronucleus, multiple copies, and micronucleus, a reserve copy. Conjugation begins when the two paramecia attach to each other. Meiosis of their diploid micronuclei produces 4 haploid micronuclei. In each cell, 3 of the haploid micronuclei disengage. The remaining micronucleus in each cell divides by mitosis. Two cells exchange one haploid micronucleus from each pair. In each cell, the micronuclei fuse to form a single diploid micronucleus, and the macronuclei disintegrate. Each of the cells form a new macronucleus from its micronucleus. Conjugation is not a type of reproduction because no new individuals are formed. Conjugation is, however, a sexual process because new combinations of genetic information are produced. In a large population, conjugation helps produce and maintain genetic diversity. Many protists have complex sexual life cycles in which they alternate between diploid and a haploid phase, a process known as alternation of generations. This is the full cycle, meiosis, and also mitosis. Asexual reproduction, and this is sexual reproduction. Haploid phase and the diploid phase. A water mold is an example of a protist that undergoes alternation of generations. Water mold grows into a long branching filament, consists of many cells formed by meiotic cell division. Water mold reproduces asexually by producing spores in a structure called a sporangium. In this sporangium, in water mold, the spores are flagellated. Water molds reproduce sexually by undergoing meiosis and forming male and female structures. Through meiosis, there's male and female reproductive structure in the egg cells, and the male reproductive structure. They combine to fertilize, and they create a zygote back to 2N. The male and female structures produce haploid nuclei that fuse together for fertilization, forming a zygote that begins a new life cycle. These zygotes form a new life cycle. Germination and mitosis. This cell will split through mitosis and create, through asexual reproduction, the sporangium, and that will split off into both asexual reproduction and also sexual reproduction with the haploid cells.